The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 4 Dragon and Herdsman. The trip, including fueling stops, took 8 days. It wasn't nearly as bad as Jack had expected it to be. Allison kept mostly to herself, coming out of her cabin for meals and sometimes to play games on the day room computer terminal. Other than that, she spent most of her time sleeping or writing in a small notebook she always kept with her. She didn't poke or pry around the ship in the middle of the night either. Jack had half expected her to try that. Uncle Verge was clearly annoyed that she didn't. Twice she accepted Jack's invitation to pair up for one of the two-player games he hadn't played since Uncle Virgil's death. He beat her both times, but by a much smaller margin the second time. Clearly, she was a fast learner. For all her hermit tendencies, her mealtime conversation was bright and cheerful. But it was mostly empty words, the sort of chatter Uncle Virgil had taught Jack how to do when he wanted to fill time without actually saying anything. Jack's efforts to get past the surface froth got him nowhere, which was extremely irritating, and not just for Jack. By the fourth day, Uncle Verge, who was as frustrated at Jack's failures to dig anything out of the girl as Jack himself was, began pushing for Jack to let him have a go at her. It was a ridiculous suggestion, of course. Even if Uncle Verge was careful with his voice and mannerisms, Allison would be bound to notice the sudden change in the computer's personality. But he kept pushing until Jack finally had to give him a direct order not to bring it up again. That stopped the demands, but it did nothing to lower the tension. Between Uncle Verge's sulking and Allison's useless conversation, Jack was thoroughly sick of both of them by the time they finally reached Rose Scrovy. "There," Allison said, pointing out the cockpit canopy at a large dark green forest at the edge of a wide plain. "That's where they'll be putting down." "Nice," Jack commented, studying the area. The forest was about 100 miles across, lying mostly to the east of a range of snow-covered mountains. A churning river rolled down the slopes, widening as it went, cutting through the center of the forest and then continuing eastward across the plain. "If you like that sort of thing." "I take it you don't?" "I prefer my nature in nice, neat layer gardens," Jack said. "So what are they coming here for?" "There's a colony of nomads that travel around the edge of the forest," she said. "My friends are supposed to be doing some trading with them." "What kind of trading?" "Some kind of wild herbs, I think," Allison said. "I'm a little foggy on the details. The Erasves, those are the natives. Hang around the edge of the forest, picking fruit, digging up roots, and pulling edible bark off the trees. They get clothing materials from other plants." "Hunter-gatherer types, then?" "Right, minus the hunter part," Allison said. "They're nomadic, too. Once they've cleared out an area, they move on around the edge of the forest. By the time they've made a complete circle, it's been a couple of years and the stuff's all grown back." "Sounds like your basic Garden of Eden," Jack suggested. "More or less," Allison agreed. "They just have to make sure they don't go too deep into the forest where all the nastier creatures live." "How nasty?" "I don't think anyone knows," she said. "No one's ever seen them, except maybe the Erasves, and they're not talking. But there are legends, and a handful of researchers who've gone into the forest have found and documented some very intriguing claw marks on trees, and even on some of the big rocks." Jack winced. That sounded ominous. "Lucky for us, we aren't going in there," he said, keying in the landing sequence. As he did so, there was a quiet beep from the board. "Computer?" he asked, frowning. "Ah, another power glitch," Uncle Verge confirmed. He was still trying to sound like a normal PS computer, but Jack could hear the tightness in his voice. "Still unable to locate the source." Jack drummed his fingers thoughtfully on the edge of the control board. This was the third time since leaving Bigelow that this mysterious power dip had happened, as if some system aboard the SNA had suddenly decided to take an extra helping of power without telling anyone. Uncle Verge had run the diagnostics a dozen times, but hadn't found anything out of place. "Any ideas?" Jack asked, looking over his shoulder at Allison. She shook her head. "I just hope it's nothing serious." "Well, you won't have to worry about it much longer," Jack said. "Computer, do you have a line on those nomads yet?"
I'm picking up a group of beings at the southern edge of the forest, Uncle Verge said. I'm not sure how many. The forest canopy is scrambling the infrared readings.
That's probably them, Allison said. There shouldn't be anyone else around. I'll go get my stuff together. Need any help? Jack asked, with just a touch of sarcasm. At their first fueling stop, at Jack's suggestion, Allison had gone off to do some shopping. From the size of the 2 travel bags she'd lugged back to the SNA, he figured she'd decided to get started on next year's wardrobe. I can manage, she assured him. If she'd noticed the sarcasm, she didn't mention it. See you. She left the cockpit. You really can't track this power glitch? Jack asked when she was out of sight.
No, and it's driving me crazy.
Uncle Verge said irritably.
It's like there's an intermittent power drain somewhere. Probably in the echo.
Why in that particular system?
Dracos asked.
Because it's the only time it shows up is when we come back into normal space,
Uncle Verge said.
There's a pulse in power utilization right as we shut down the echo drive. Then a few minutes later, we get this dip effect, like something is sucking up extra power.
Could it be a problem with the cooldown? Jack suggested. Some wire contacting too fast and making contact where it's not supposed to?
If it is, it's not showing up on the diagnostics.
Uncle Verge said.
I'm probably going to have to do a systematic shutdown to isolate it. But I don't think we want to hang around this rock while I do that.
On the other hand, we may have the necessary time to spare,
Draco said. He jabbed his tongue toward the sensor display.
I see no sign of any ship.
So?
Uncle Verge asked.
If her friends have been delayed, Allison may be marooned,
Draco said patiently.
All Jack promised was to bring her here.
Uncle Verge said tartly.
He never said we'd stay and hold her hand, yeah?
We cannot simply fly away and abandon her,
Dracos insisted.
That's none of our business, yeah?
Uncle Verge insisted right back.
Besides, there's half a chance that she won't want us to see who it is who comes to get her, yeah?
Can we just get down there? Jack interrupted. We can decide later whether or not to throw her a going-away party. The winds sweeping over the mountains made the approach trickier than Jack had expected. But Uncle Verge was equal to the task, and soon they had passed over the snow-covered peaks and were flying over the river on their way to the forest below.
Interesting,
Dracos commented, the side of his triangular head pressed against the canopy as he tried to look straight down.
I do not believe I have ever seen water quite so chaotic.
They're called rapids, Jack told him. Fast and shallow water running over big rocks just below the surface.
Actually, the only rapids I spotted are higher up the mountain, Uncle Verge said. The water along here is really pretty deep.
Jack frowned. And what's causing all the white water? He asked, maneuvering the SNA a few yards to the side to give him a better view of the river.
Probably have some underwater springs coming up in under pressure,
Uncle Verge said.
I can't tell for sure. There's a lot of silt churning around down there, throwing off my sensors.
So it's like a free-flowing spa tub? Jack suggested.
Free-flowing spa tub for walruses, Uncle Verge said. That water's mighty cold,
I wasn't suggesting we take a dip, Jack assured him, turning his attention to the forest. Close up, it looked even darker and more ominous than it had from low orbit. You spotting any technology at all down there?
None, Uncle Verge said. As far as I can tell, this place is as primitive as you can get in the Orion Arm,
I guess Gardens of Eden are supposed to be that way, Jack said, shifting his eyes to the more cheerful-looking plain at the forest's southern edge. Well, let's get to it. The sooner we drop Allison, the sooner we can get back to the job of rescuing Dracos' people. Given their apparent lack of technology, Jack had half expected the colony of Erasmus to scatter in panic as the SNA flew past overhead,
and then settled to the ground 100 yards from the forest. Not only did they not scatter, but most of them didn't even bother to look at the big metal bird that had invaded their territory. Yeah, certainly are calm types, yeah? Uncle Verge commented as Jack shut the ship's systems down to standby. It's better than the alternative, Jack said. Dracos, can you see all right?
I am fine,
The dragon assured him.
and I can hear and smell as well. If there are any predators nearby, I should detect them before they become a threat.
He pushed against Jack's shirt as he lifted his head from Jack's shoulder.
Or is that not what your question meant?
Yeah, it was, Jack said, grimacing. Sometimes the dragon read his mind a little too well. Allison was waiting at the airlock, her 2 travel bags at her sides. I'm told there are enough traders and mining speculators poking around these colonies that there should at least be 1 or 2 Erasmus in the group who speak English, she told Jack as he keyed the outer door. You might want to let me do the talking, though. Be my guest, Jack said, gesturing her to go ahead of him. Thanks. She gestured to the tangler Jack had built it at his waist. You'll want to keep that in its holster, too. It's just a tangler, Jack said. With shock rounds? Low current variety only, Jack assured her. Just enough juice to stun most beings without damaging them. Good, Allison said. Keep it in its holster anyway. The Erasmus hadn't been much interested in the SNA's approach. They were just as uninterested in the 2 humans walking across the hair-like grass toward them. A couple of the aliens looked up, but then returned calmly to their work of picking berries off the colorful vines that grew up the sides of the trees. What? Allison asked. What do you mean, what? Jack growled. You were muttering something. Oh. Jack hadn't even noticed he was speaking. I was just thinking. About? He gestured at the Erasmus. I did some berry picking a while back. It wasn't very pleasant. Ah, Allison said. Well, in the future, if you want to talk to yourself, talk a little quieter. Clamping his jaw firmly shut, Jack kept walking. Focusing his attention on the aliens, he tried to force back the memories of the Brumgan slave camp. The Erasmus were actually quite human-looking, if bald, pale-skinned creatures who looked like overweight sumo wrestlers could be said to look human. The 20 children, Jack could see, were already starting to fill out, while the 30 or 40 adults were just plain huge. It was a wonder that their stubby legs could even carry all that weight. But apparently they could. The Erasmus seemed quite comfortable as they moved back and forth among the trees, picking berries and either eating them right there or else putting them into one of the massive pockets in the heavy greenish-brown robes they wore wrapped kimono style around their bulk. Their arms were as strong as their legs, too. Jack watched as an adult weighing at least 300 pounds hold himself up on one of the branches, chin-up style, to check out a vine running along the top. One of the few aliens who had bothered to watch the SNA's landing looked over again as the visitors approached. He looked them up and down, then detached himself from the group and waddled over to meet them.
A noon sun, satisfied belly to you,
He greeted them in heavily accented English. His smile was wide, seeming to split his face in half, and his eyes were half closed and rather dreaming looking.
I am Hren.
A noon sun and satisfied belly to you, too, Allison said, bowing her head toward him. I'm Allison. This is Jack.
Fine names for one so young,
Hren said approvingly.
Have you come to join in our midday song?
Jack glanced at the sun, which wasn't even close to being overhead. The Erasmus apparently scheduled their rest breaks early. I'm afraid not, Allison said. I've come to meet up with 2 others of our people.
Not such have been here for many songs,
Hren said, some of the dreaminess going out of his eyes as he frowned thoughtfully at her.
Are you sure you do have the right place?
I'm sure, Allison said, but they may have been delayed. Would you mind if I waited here for them?
Your company would be as sweet as Bishti Berry,
Hren said.
And since you are here, will you not please join us in our midday song?
He looked at Jack.
You especially would be most heartily welcome.
Jack frowned, throwing a sideways look at Allison. Me?
Yes,
Friend said, smiling knowingly.
because of...
He broke off, waving a hand at Jack's chest.
But come,
He went on, looking at Allison.
you all are welcome.
We all? Allison asked. Don't you mean we both? A slight frown creased Friend's face.
Perhaps I used the wrong word,
He said. Puckering his lips, gazing out into space as if in deep thought, he reached a wide hand to the front of his robe. For a moment he flapped it in and out as he fanned air into his torso. Then he let go, leaving it partway open at the neck. And Jack froze. Staring from the big Arasvas's right collar bone area and curving around over his shoulder to his back was a wide green and brown tattoo, an image of a large serpentine creature. Only it wasn't just any serpentine creature, and it wasn't a tattoo. It was a Kada. Thank you for the offer, Allison was saying. Yes, Jack cut her off. We'd be honored to attend your song.